Seems like it's been forever since I've preached on Sunday night. It's good to be back with you. We are continuing our series on the afterlife, and I believe it would serve us well to look at the issue of actually two issues really, psychics and mediums, as well as those trips to the other side. I've kind of combined those two tonight because really as they stand alone, it's pretty short in our discussion of them, so I've combined the two of them. And I want to talk about, first of all, these experiences that people have going to heaven and then returning. What do we say about those? I mean, who are we to judge what a person has experienced? Can we really say anything about it? Well, the truth of the matter is these experiences contradict what the Bible has to say, and so therefore I do think they deserve our attention and at least some assessment on our part. One of the more popular books out right now is a book entitled Proof of Heaven, written by Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who says that he experienced death and a trip to heaven and came back, and he wrote about it. He was unconscious for 7 days in the hospital after a almost deadly bout of E. coli bacteria and meningitis, and he wrote about this, made the talk show circuits, the radio programs, talking about his experience. He said he was guided through heaven by a beautiful young lady who said these three things. Number one, you are loved and cherished dearly forever. Number two, you have nothing to fear. And number three, there is nothing that you can do wrong. Now, obviously, as I said before, these experiences, while we hear a lot about them, are often contradictory to what the Bible teaches. And so let's look for just a few minutes at what this gentleman experienced, and it really applies to all of these situations. Number one, have you ever noticed that in all of these cases, they occur in a hospital? I mean, the vast majority, anyway, of these cases occur in a hospital when somebody is under anesthesia or there's fast firing of the brain and different things of that nature. Obviously, people become confused in the hospital. Is the only explanation that a person died and went to heaven and came back. We know that our mind can play tricks on us. But my point is, all of these happen in a hospital setting. Where is the situation where a person is clinically dead in the tomb for 4 days, like Lazarus was, and then comes back to life? We never have a documented case of that ever. It's always under hospital conditions, which should tell us something. Secondly, why is it that we never hear of someone going to hell and back? It's always heaven, right? No matter the character of the person, no matter if they ever went to church, whatever, they always go to heaven and come back. They never have an experience where they go to hell and come back and tell us about it. And in fact, Dr. Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon that wrote his book about his experience, admits that he was not a Christian, that he went to the Episcopal Church on Christmas and Easter if he went at all. So obviously there's a contradiction there with the Bible, is there not? Not everybody goes to heaven. Unfortunately, not everybody's going to make it, right? And so there is a contradiction there as well. Thirdly, Hebrews 9:27 reveals that it is appointed for man to die once and then the judgment. Now, God can make exceptions. He has with Enoch. We know that Lazarus was raised again and then died again later. I mean, obviously, God can make exceptions, but I wouldn't bank on that. It is appointed for man to die once and then the judgment. So here we have a contradiction as well. Now, in the February issue of this year of Think Magazine, Dr. Brad Harrub approached this book detailing some of the flaws in the thinking and the reports of Dr. Eben Alexander. If you know Dr. Harrub's background, his study is in the field of neuroscience, and so he speaks from experience. And he says, first of all, Dr. Alexander states that his brain wasn't working at all. He says, Dr. Alexander provides no evidence, though, no brain scans, no nothing. All he says is, trust me, I'm a doctor. He goes on to say, but in my case, the neocortex was out of the picture. I was encountering the reality of a world of consciousness that existed completely free of the limitations of my physical brain. Dr. Harrub responds, so his claim that his neocortex was dead is the basis of why his near-death experience happened and not just some weird physiological malfunction or fast firing of the brain. But dead means dead. And if the neocortex is totally dead for 7 days, then how did it start working perfectly after that? How could his neocortex be perfectly dead and then respond 7 days later? When questioned about this, the neuroscientist Mark Cohen, when questioned by this, by neuroscientist Mark Cohen, Dr. Alexander said, well, the thing is, I would not say completely inactive. So which is it, right? Is it completely dead, or is it just somewhat inactive? Like I say, stories like these are intriguing. If you want a book that goes on the bestseller list, just write about a near-death experience. It seems like they always move to the top of the bestsellers list. People like to hear about these experiences, but there are other explanations, like fast firing of the brain that Dr. Vadney or Dr. Lawling could probably tell you more about than I could. We know that the brain plays tricks on us. Just think about dreams that you've had and how real they felt. Sometimes we even wake up in a confused state thinking we're somewhere else and we have to get our bearings about us. We also know that in the hospital where virtually all of these situations occur, there are medications, there are things that are going through a person's system that can cause them to act quite differently. Use Roy Scott as an example. When he was in the hospital, he was totally convinced, even after he got out for some time, that you went to California. And I would not be able to convince you otherwise. You were totally convinced of that. Obviously, the brain can play tricks on us. And it's a very intricate organ that sometimes we just don't understand why it works the way that it does. Sometimes we have a dream-like scenario or situation that we can't explain and that interferes with reality or mixes with reality. There's many times where I'll look back on a day and I'll reflect and say, did I dream that or did that happen? I can't remember. Obviously, there are other explanations, especially when we talk about it conflicting with what the Bible teaches. Now, leaving that subject, what about psychics and mediums? Seems that psychics are very popular again. They were popular back with Dionne Warwick and her friends, which you would think if she was a psychic, she would see that they were going to go bankrupt, but she never saw that, did she? At least didn't seem to. But it seems now that they're popular again. They've got a couple of television shows on cable now, Long Island Medium, and there's a new one being advertised called Psychic Tia. And there are people who put and invest a lot into what a psychic has to say, and to tarot cards and reading the tea leaves and your daily horoscope. I mean, there are a lot of people who really invest in this and want to know what the psychic says and what their future is going to be. They read their palm and tell them who they're going to marry and how life is going to work out for them. One of the more popular psychics of long ago was a woman by the name of Jean Dixon, a Roman Catholic who claimed that God had blessed her with the gift of prophecy. However, if you know anything about Jean Dixon's prophecies, you know that she was a miserable failure many times. She, among other things, predicted that Russia would be the first nation to put a man on the moon, that World War III would break out in October of 1958, that Walter Reuther would be a Democratic candidate for president in 1964. She also said that there would be no significant legislation passed in 1965. Now, those of you who have lived long enough and can look back know that Russia has never put a man on the moon. World War III has yet to break out. Walter Reuther was never a candidate for president. And in 1965, Congress passed two very significant pieces of legislation, the Medicare bill and the Civil Rights Act. She also once prophesied that John F. Kennedy would be elected president in 1960, but apparently forgot that prediction because when 1960 rolled around, she said, no, I declared that Nixon would be president. And perhaps her most profound prediction came when she prophesied that a child born somewhere in the Middle East shortly after 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on February the 5th, 1962, would revolutionize the world. She would go on to predict that by the end of 1999, he will bring together all mankind in one uniform faith. This new faith would be the foundation of a new Christianity. And of course, here we are several years removed from 1999, and this has not happened. When it comes to Jean Dixon and so-called prophets or prophetesses like her, the reason they are discredited is the same reason why these claims of near-death experiences raise skepticism, because they are contradictory to the Bible. In Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, we read these words. God, after He spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in His Son, whom He appointed heir to all things, of all things, I should say, through whom also He made the world. Now, these last days here is a reference to the Christian age, the age that we are currently living in and the age that we will live in until Christ returns. And the Hebrew writer makes it clear that the Word of God, the Holy Scriptures, is the means by which God communicates His message to us today. It's not through visions or dreams or prophets. There are no more prophets because they are not needed. We have everything that we need. You'll remember in 1 Corinthians 13 that Paul talked about when the perfect comes, that these things will be done away with. What is the perfect? Well, some say that it's Jesus, and because Jesus hasn't returned, then therefore prophecies and things of that nature are still in place. But that word perfect there is neuter, which means it's not male or female. And in fact, it's a Greek word that means complete will or complete revelation. Paul's talking about the Word of God, that when it becomes complete, that we will not need these other things because they are no longer necessary when the perfect comes, and it has. And in 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3, Peter writes, "Seeing that His divine power has granted to us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and excellence." We have everything, folks. We have everything pertaining to life and godliness. So why do you need another book to go along with it? If we have everything pertaining to life and godliness, why do you need some other doctrine? If we have everything pertaining to life and godliness, then what did Joseph Smith get? What did Muhammad get? What did these other modern-day prophets claim to be receiving? What were they receiving if we have everything pertaining to life and godliness? I'll answer it for you. They weren't receiving a message from God, because God has given us the complete will, complete revelation through the Holy Scriptures. And if God has given us everything pertaining to life and godliness, then there's no more to give to somebody like Gene Dixon or Teresa Caputo, Long Island Medium, or Psychic Tia, or anybody else. These words, their words, are not from God. They're some other message that they are conjuring up in their mind. The Bible is everything. We don't need anything else. Add to all of this the fact that true prophets were never wrong. And you read about prophets in the Bible, and they were never wrong. They didn't strike out at times. They were always right because what they were prophesying about came from God. You look at modern day prophets throughout the centuries, throughout the years, you want to go back past Gene Dixon even. They made mistakes. They weren't always on target. True prophecy that comes from God was always correct, was always true because of the source. Isaiah 41:22 and 23 reads, "Let them bring forth and declare to us what is going to take place. As for the former events, declare what they were, that they may consider them and know their outcome. Or announce to us what is coming. Declare the things that are going to come afterward, that we may know that you are God's. Indeed, do good or evil, that we may anxiously look about us and fear together." Now, in chapters 40 and 41 of Isaiah, God is showing His superiority over the idols that the people of that day had turned to. And He's showing His superiority by setting Himself apart as the only one who can foretell what will take place in the future. The power of the biblical prophet to predict future events was an ability given to them by God. It was through the prophets that God worked, that He told His message. They were His tool for conveying a message to the people, a message that sometimes included telling of future events, but not always. Idols, of course, do not have this ability. No other God has this ability. And so, it leads to a question. How do mediums and psychics do it? They seem to be so effective. And there are people who have gone to a reading or have visited with a psychic or a medium, and they are totally convinced that it was true, that it was right. Well, let me tell you this. If you watch the show, for instance, Long Island Medium, which I never have, if you watch that show, she seems to be right on target. At least that's what people tell me. But if you go to one of her shows and sit in the audience, you find out she strikes out a lot. In fact, she's not very good at reading the public. Now, what she employs is a tactic that is used and has been used for years. It's called a cold reading. And what you do is you gather an audience large enough and you start asking questions that eventually is going to hit somebody between the eyes. And then you do what's called piggybacking. And you piggyback off of things, and you keep going until you convince people that you know what you're talking about. In simplest terms, that's what is being done. Some people are brilliant at it. John Edward, for instance, is very good at it. And people who know that he is not some sort of modern-day prophet even say and admit that he is very good at what he does. But it's almost like magic. It may be a gift in that it's someone who is able to do something that maybe the average person can't do, but it's certainly not from God. It's a simple tactic that some people get very good at, a craft, a hobby that they can do. They're not communicating with the dead. They're not telling your future, but they're really good at what they do. Steve Lloyd is a minister of the gospel who has studied these things, and he says, although I'm no expert in cold reading and that I've never performed one, he says the concept is really simple enough to grasp. If the psychic wants to reveal something about a person's past, he or she begins fishing for affirming nods or verbal agreements from one to whom the reading is being conducted. And they continue along these lines, making very general statements until they are satisfied they have revealed something that would impress you or at least earn them some money. Lloyd then says that when a psychic ventures to predict the future, they will be vague enough so that their prediction can be fulfilled in a variety of ways. He tells of a particular incident in which a woman was told that her life would be filled with song. Her daughter became a song leader in high school. He adds, I've often wondered how many of the speculative predictions that fit in the realm of the fantastic but have failed are ever revisited. Certainly we don't hear about those testimonials. And obviously, if you're on camera in a show that is pre-recorded, you can edit it or you make it look any way that you want to. One professional performer at a lecture for magic enthusiasts spoke about how to make extra money at psychic fairs. He said this, you develop 9 lines to deliver to customers. When the first customer extends their palm to be read, you deliver the first 3 lines. You deliver the second set of 3 lines to the next customer and the third set of 3 to the third. And then you recycle the lines for the 4th through 6th and so on. You recycle the lines so no one is ever in earshot of what you said to the other customers. So, it is a craft. It is a talent, if you will, but it's certainly not from God. When it comes to those who claim that they can speak to the dead, we can turn to Luke chapter 16, for instance, to see clear evidence to the contrary. After the physical death of Lazarus and the rich man, Lazarus, as we know, finds himself in paradise in the comfort of Abraham's bosom. We know that the rich man finds himself in a place of torment in the Hadean realm. And we see that their status is fixed. They're in a fixed state. They're not going to be leaving there to come back to earth, to revisit loved ones, or to be conjured up from the dead by a psychic or a medium. We see even that the rich man begged and pleaded that Lazarus go back and inform his family so that they wouldn't fall in the same state. And he was denied that request. You see, they were in a fixed position. I mentioned Teresa Caputo a moment ago, the platinum blonde with a vivid personality who has her own show called Long Island Medium. If you've ever watched the show, you've noticed that she is very accurate. But as I said, in her public performances, she strikes out many times. She describes piggybacking in this way. She says, when the spirits piggyback, they will give me things you can't connect with, but others can. Now, if you caught that, that is just a very professional, very polished way of saying, I failed and this is my excuse. The spirits are piggybacking and they're coming off of a failure to find the one that it applies to. And obviously, that doesn't make a lot of sense. If one has the gift of prophecy or is a prophet, they don't make mistakes. It reminds me of a time that we'd have a Bible study when I was a youth minister in Batesville, Arkansas, and there were many intelligent men that were involved in this Bible study, and it included many people from all over the community, some who were not members of the church. And this one gentleman asked if he could come and and visit us at the Bible study. He was from the Mormon Church, and obviously we told him it was fine. We always welcome folks to come. And he was talking about how that there are 12 apostles in their church at Salt Lake. And the question was presented very sincerely, well, what happens if one of those apostles dies? He said, well, they all pray about the one that is to take his place. And so one of the gentlemen there said, now wait a minute. When you pray about that, you're telling me that God puts the name of the next man, the successor, in each one of your heads? And he goes, well, not at first. We have to discuss it afterwards. And we continue until we all come to the same conclusion. If you're going to God and He is the one that is putting the man in that position, you would think that you wouldn't have to have trial and error, that it would be perfectly clear, right? If these are modern day apostles, that's how it works, right? You see, these things are damaging and they're dangerous. I know it's novelty to a lot of folks and they find it very interesting, but it's very damaging. And you may be saying to yourself, well, don't we have an instance in the Old Testament where Saul sought the counsel of a medium, namely the so-called witch at Endor, right? But if you look at that account, which is found in 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 3 through 25, we're not going to read all of that. Read it sometime. But that is where Saul seeks the counsel of this woman at Endor. Does this give credibility to all those who have followed since? Because it does seem that she brings Samuel back from the dead so that he can speak to Saul. But if you read that account closely, you understand that it wasn't the woman that brought him back. That yes, dead Samuel did speak to Saul, but it wasn't the woman that conjured him up from the dead. It was God. Because the woman was frightened. She was terrified to death. It was God, and his reason for doing so in this unique situation was to emphasize the doom of Saul and God's displeasure for him to even coming to this medium in the first place. You see, this does matter. This is important because this is not just entertainment. The Lord considers psychics, mediums to be an abomination. Listen to what is written in Deuteronomy 18, beginning in verse 11. Or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord. And because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you. Pretty plain language. Psychics, mediums, fortune tellers, a Ouija board, and the like, they are an abomination to the Lord because they encourage people to place their faith in something other than the one true God. They encourage people to place their confidence and trust in something other than God. You see, folks, I'm not a medium. I'm not a psychic. I can't predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you this. You don't need to be reading the tea leaves. You need to be reading the Bible. And I can also tell you this, though I'm not a prophet, and though I'm not one that can predict the future, I can tell you this with all certainty, that if you are a child of God, if you faithfully follow His will, then at the end of your life, you're going to have an eternity with Him. And if you don't, then you're going to have an eternity separated from Him. And the reason I can tell you that is because God communicates that message through His Word. And so if you're sitting here tonight and you are not a child of God, then I encourage you to put on Christ in baptism this evening and begin that faithful walk with Him. If you are a child of God and you need the prayers and support of this church family to get back on track, then I encourage you to do that as well. Put your faith and trust in the one true God. Come now as we stand and as we sing.